Newsfeed continues for you now here on Newzroom Afrika, channel 405. Let's turn to this now. According to fund advisors, land reform beneficiaries, along with communal property associations, need to work on governance practices to address some of the challenges facing beneficiaries. Challenges have proven to be a barrier to the success of land reform programs. To discuss this now further, joined by Peter Setou, who is the Chief Executive of Vumelana Advisory Fund. Peter, thank you for joining us this afternoon. Good to have you.
Thank you for having me, and good afternoon to your viewers.
Let's talk about Vumelana first. What do you do?
Vumelana is a non-profit public benefit organization that assists beneficiaries of land reform to develop their land. We do this through supporting them in order to attract much needed investments into their land. As we know that there are challenges within the land reform space. So part of what we are doing is to really facilitate partnerships between beneficiaries of land reform in the form of communal property associations and land owning trusts, and the private investors, as it were, so that much needed jobs can be created, skills can be transferred, and income can be created for land reform beneficiaries.
Yeah. I must be honest, the last time I saw any report on CPAs was back in 2009, probably 2010. At the time, we had about 1,500 or so CPAs in the country. What's the lay of the land today?
Well, excuse me, sorry. Well, the Department of Rural Development and Land Reform does produce annual reports on CPAs, which really carries information on how CPAs are performing, whether they are complying with the prescriptions of the law. To date, we've got in excess of 1,700 CPAs that are actually registered with the department as the regulator of CPAs. However, sadly, majority of those CPAs are actually failing to conform to some of the basic requirements of good governance and compliance with the Communal Property Associations Act.
Yeah. So at the time, of course, they were also still failing, and the political question being asked was whether or not these were the correct vehicles for holding land. What's your feeling?
Well, the reality is, I mean, as I've said, you already have 1,700 CPAs that are effectively registered. And you also have some pockets of success within CPAs. You've got some of the CPAs who have actually been doing very well in terms of managing their assets, in terms of ensuring that their membership can actually benefit. So I don't think it's got so much to do with the concept of CPAs. I don't think there's anything wrong per se with that. I think where the challenge lies is provision of support to these entities. As you can imagine, at a point when the land is actually transferred to these entities, in most instances, they do not have access to finance in order to be able to work the land. They don't even have the requisite skills to be able to run their affairs, which is why post-settlement is so key, i.e. to provide them with the requisite support such that they're able to run their affairs in a much better fashion. This is what we have been trying to do as Vumelana over the last 10 years in supporting these entities so that they can be better entities, so that we can attract much needed investments in the form of private investments, so that they can partner with the private sector, which has got access to capital, access to markets, and have got the requisite skill sets in order to work the land. But over and above that, you need to make sure that those entities are actually well run, i.e. that there is transparency, there's good governance, because if you don't make sure that there is good governance, the minute the first R1 million lent into the bank account, then you'll see some level of infightings amongst the communities, And but also over and above that, investors make calculated decisions. There's no right-minded private investor who would partner with a community under circumstances where there are lots of infightings, which is why the whole issue around ensuring that those entities, these communal property associations, are well run is so key. It's an important ingredient in ensuring that they can utilize their land productively.
Yeah. Talking of infighting, I mean, like I'm saying, the last time I looked at CPAs was very long ago, but at the time we were having also conversations around traditional leaders saying that the CPAs undermine their authority. Have traditional leaders and CPA found a better way, a synergy of working together?
Well, I think the challenges remain in terms of ensuring that there is harmony between traditional authorities and communal property associations. In my view, there is no contradiction between the two. In fact, I'm aware of several CPAs where the traditional authority or traditional authorities have got very good working relationships with the CPAs. I think it all boils down to ensuring that the CPAs, including the traditional authorities, are also capacitated so that they can focus on what's really important, which is looking after the interests of their membership, instead of, these infightings which are frequently around, personal issues more than any other thing, which is why I believe that these entities needs to be supported.
How do you then, in instances where there was infighting and maybe even other members of the community are looking at the CPA in a negative view, how do you restore the trust of the community in communal property associations?
I think you're raising an important point. And for us, this is really the starting point. At a point before even the assets are transferred to the community, it is important to really do an assessment to say, whether the CPAs are capacitated enough to be able to deal with the challenges that lie ahead. You need to check whether do they have policies and procedures in place, because unfortunately, where there are group dynamics, you need to make sure that there is transparency. And in instances where there are, for example, infightings or disagreements amongst the parties, there are entities, there are individuals that you can, or entities that you can bring on board to try and mediate between these two parties. But our experience has been that where there's good corporate governance, where there is transparency, where there are clear policies and procedures in terms of administration, how benefits will be distributed, the lifespan of the executives, how the executives will be appointed, etc., compliance with the CPA constitution. When you've got those, when you've got those right, you limit the chances of actually having infighting between the CPAs themselves and the traditional authorities. And the traditional authorities, in most instances, they are ex officio members of the executive, which means they invariably form part of the executive. In that way, they don't feel, there's no sense of being left out as the traditional authority. They become part and parcel of development.
So what is your strategy that you are taking as a Vumelana Advisory Fund to capacitate CPAs?
Well, we have devised an organizational development and capacity building support program, which is really intended to strengthen and capacitate the CPAs and land-owning trust and promote transparency and good governance. We have developed, as a starting point, we have developed an assessment tool which we use to identify the gaps and the entity's needs, So this is a formal process that we do. We utilize the services we've got a panel of advisors that we work through. And once we've done this assessment, we conclude, or we rather develop an implementation plan, that really seeks to address the requirements of the gaps that we would have identified in terms of in the assessment that we've done. So these interventions will usually run for a period of 1 to 2 years. It would cover an array of areas such as organizational development, finance and administration systems, development of policies and procedures to guide the running of the CPIs and businesses for the benefit of the community. It also entails hand-holding them to a point where they can even get to a point where their financials are actually audited and they can report back to the general membership. So this is part of what we've been doing, and we are offering to the communities that we are supporting. Over and above that, we are currently developing what I would call self-help tools that once we've concluded that process, we will share more broadly with the CPAs, which they can use to really make sure that they improve on their financial affairs, on their administration, etc.
Peter Setou, much appreciated. Thanks so much for sharing that with us. He is the Chief Executive for Vumelana Advisory Funds there. Let's turn to this now. Former National Lotteries Commission's grant manager